The storm was Category 5. The airline was on fire. 312 passengers were going to die. Captain Amaya Thompson had one impossible choice: turn back and crash or fly straight through hell. Then, 2 F-22 Raptors appeared on her wingtips with a message that changed everything. What happened next at 37,000 feet would rewrite every rule about commercial aviation and military cooperation. Meet Captain Amaya Thompson. 34 years old, dark skin that showed her Caribbean heritage, black hair pulled back in a professional bun, and amber eyes that could assess an aircraft's condition with a single glance. She had been flying commercial aircraft for 12 years, accumulating over 15,000 flight hours across every weather condition imaginable. But nothing had prepared her for October 15th. Flight 447 from New York to London was supposed to be routine. A Boeing 777-300ER, one of the most reliable wide-body aircraft ever built, carrying 312 passengers and 18 crew members across the Atlantic Ocean. The weather forecast had mentioned some turbulence over the mid-Atlantic, but nothing unusual for autumn crossing. Amaya had performed her pre-flight checks with the same meticulous attention to detail that had earned her a reputation as one of the airline's most safety-conscious pilots. Every system was functioning perfectly. Fuel load was optimal. Weather radar showed clear skies for the first third of the journey, with some scattered clouds developing later. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," Amaya announced as Flight 447 pushed back from the gate at JFK International Airport. "We're expecting a smooth flight today with an estimated flight time of 6 hours and 47 minutes. We'll be cruising at 37,000 feet, and I'm pleased to report that the weather looks excellent for most of our journey. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Her co-pilot, First Officer David Reynolds, completed the final checklist items as they taxied toward the runway. "All systems green, Captain. We're ready for takeoff." "Copy that," Amaya replied, advancing the throttles as they received clearance from air traffic control. "Flight 447 is rolling." The massive Boeing 777 accelerated down the runway, its twin GE90 engines producing over 200,000 pounds of thrust. At exactly 160 knots, Amaya pulled back on the control column, and the aircraft lifted smoothly into the autumn sky. For the first 2 hours, everything was perfect. Passengers enjoyed their meals, watched movies, and settled in for the transatlantic crossing. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, serving drinks and ensuring everyone was comfortable. Amaya monitored the aircraft systems with the calm professionalism that came from thousands of hours in the cockpit. The autopilot was engaged, the weather radar showed nothing concerning, and all engine parameters were nominal. Then, at exactly 1847 hours Zulu time, everything changed. "Captain, we're getting some unusual weather data from the Meteorological Service," David said, studying the updated forecast on his display. "There's a storm system developing much faster than predicted. They're calling it a Category 5 superstorm, and it's directly in our path." Amaya pulled up the weather overlay on her navigation display. What she saw made her breath catch. A massive storm system, hundreds of miles across, was forming with unprecedented speed over the central Atlantic. The meteorological models showed wind speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour, with severe turbulence, icing conditions, and lightning activity that could tear an aircraft apart. "That's impossible," she said quietly. "Storms don't develop that quickly. This has to be a data error." "I thought so too, Captain, but I'm getting confirmation from 3 different sources: NOAA, European Weather Service, and our own company meteorologists are all saying the same thing. This storm appeared out of nowhere about 40 minutes ago and is intensifying at a rate they've never seen before." Amaya immediately contacted air traffic control. "Gander Center, this is Flight 447, requesting updated routing to avoid the storm system at our 12 o'clock position." The response came back quickly. "Flight 447, Gander Center. Be advised that storm system is expanding rapidly. We're working on alternate routing, but several aircraft are already diverting. Stand by for updated clearance. For the next 15 minutes, Amaya worked with air traffic control to find a safe route around the storm. Every option they evaluated showed the same problem. The storm was growing so fast that it was closing off all the normal diversion routes. Aircraft ahead of them were turning back, requesting emergency landings in Canada, or desperately searching for gaps in the weather that were disappearing as quickly as they formed. "Captain," David said, his voice tight with concern, "if we turn back now, we might not have enough fuel to reach the nearest airport. And if we try to go around, the storm might cut us off before we clear it." Amaya ran the fuel calculations in her head. They were at the point of no return, too far from North America to turn back safely, but not yet close enough to Europe to push forward with certainty. The storm had positioned itself perfectly to create an impossible situation. "Flight 447, Gander Center, we need your decision. The storm is expanding into all alternative routes. We can try to vector you around the northern edge, but there are no guarantees." Before Amaya could respond, the aircraft shuddered violently. Warning lights illuminated across the instrument panel, and both engines showed sudden fluctuations in performance. "What the hell was that?" David shouted over the sudden chaos of alarms. Amaya's training took over instantly. "Engine anomaly on both power plants. Possible lightning strike or severe wind shear. I'm taking manual control." She disconnected the autopilot and felt the aircraft respond sluggishly to her inputs. The Boeing 777 was flying into something that no modern airliner was designed to handle, atmospheric conditions so violent that they were affecting systems that should have been bulletproof. Then the fire warning sounded. "Fire in the left engine nacelle," David called out, his hands moving across the fire suppression controls, initiating shutdown procedure. "Negative," Amaya countermanded. "If we shut down that engine now, we won't have enough power to maintain altitude. Hold off on the shutdown until I can assess our situation." The aircraft bucked and rolled as they penetrated the outer edges of the storm. Lightning flashed around them, so close that Amaya could smell the ozone through the aircraft's ventilation system. The passengers were screaming, and the flight attendants' emergency call signals were lighting up across the panel. "Gander Center, Flight 447, declaring emergency. We have engine fire, severe turbulence, and we're being forced into the storm system. Request immediate assistance." "Flight 447, copy your emergency. All available rescue assets are being positioned. Can you maintain altitude?" "Negative, Gander. We're losing altitude," and a massive lightning strike hit the aircraft directly, and every electrical system went dark. The backup generators kicked in after 3 seconds that felt like eternity. But when the displays came back online, the news was catastrophic. Both engines were now showing critical failures. The fire warning systems were screaming. Hydraulic pressure was dropping. The aircraft was descending through 35,000 feet with no power and minimal control authority. Have you ever faced a moment when every option led to disaster? Sometimes survival means choosing the least impossible path and hoping skill can overcome fate. Amaya's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, but she knew the mathematics of their situation. A Boeing 777 without engine power becomes a very expensive glider, and gliders don't perform well at 35,000 feet over the open ocean. "David, get on the radio. Tell the passengers we're experiencing technical difficulties and to brace for possible emergency landing." "Captain, we're over the Atlantic. There's nowhere to land." "Then tell them to brace for controlled water landing. We need to prepare for ditching." As David made the announcement that would send 312 passengers into panic, Amaya fought to keep the aircraft stable. The storm was tearing at them with winds that exceeded anything in her experience. Rain hammered the windscreen so hard she could barely see. Lightning turned the sky into a strobe light nightmare. Then she heard a voice on the emergency frequency that changed everything. "Commercial flight in distress. This is Viper Leader, United States Air Force. We have you on radar and we're coming to assist." Amaya grabbed the radio. "Viper Leader, this is Flight 447. We have dual engine failure, fire in the nacelles, and we're descending through 32,000 feet with no power. We're approximately 800 miles from the nearest land." "Copy that. Flight 447. Stand by, we have a solution that's going to sound crazy, but it's your only chance. Two F-22 Raptor fighters appeared on our wingtips, seemingly materializing out of the storm like ghosts. Their formation lights were barely visible through the rain and lightning, but Amaya could see them clearly enough to recognize the most advanced fighter aircraft in the American arsenal. Flight 447, this is Colonel Sarah Martinez, commanding Viper leader. We've been tracking this storm for the past hour, and we've discovered something. There's a corridor through the eye of the storm, a relatively calm channel that's only about 2 miles wide, but it extends all the way through to clear air on the other side. Colonel, with all due respect, I'm flying a commercial airliner without engine power. I can't maneuver through a 2-mile corridor in these conditions. You won't have to, Captain. We'll guide you. We'll fly formation with you, and our aircraft can handle the severe turbulence. You just follow our lead and we'll get you through. Amaya looked at David, whose expression reflected her own disbelief. Captain, this is insane. We're talking about flying formation with fighter jets through the worst storm in history in an aircraft that's basically a glider at this point. I'm aware of that, David. I'm also aware that if we don't try, we're going to ditch in the Atlantic in conditions that guarantee no survivors. She keyed the radio. Falcon leader, what's your plan? We position ourselves on your wingtips and slightly ahead. You follow our flight path exactly. We have sensors that can see through this storm and identify the safest route. The corridor we found has lower wind speeds and minimal lightning activity. It's not going to be smooth, but it's survivable. And if I lose sight of you in the storm, then we all die together, Captain. But I didn't fly through this nightmare just to watch a passenger plane go down. Trust me, we can do this. Amaya made the decision in less than 3 seconds. Falcon leader, Flight 447 accepting your assistance. What are your instructions? First, can you restart those engines? Negative. We have fire damage and possible foreign object ingestion from the lightning strike. Then we're doing this on glide power. Captain, I need you to understand something. Once we enter that corridor, there's no turning back. The storm walls are too violent. We go straight through, or we don't come out. Understood. We're committed. Good. Now listen carefully. I'm going to position Falcon 2 on your right wing, and I'll take your left. We'll descend to 28,000 feet where the corridor begins. When I give the signal, you'll follow my exact flight path. Any deviation, any hesitation, and the storm will tear you apart. Amaya felt the aircraft shudder as they descended. The fire warnings were still blaring, smoke was beginning to seep into the cabin, and 312 passengers were experiencing the terror of their lives. But she had a plan now, however insane it might be. The two F-22s positioned themselves perfectly on either wing, their formation lights creating reference points in the chaos. Through her windscreen, Amaya could see Colonel Stone in the left Raptor, her helmet turning toward the airliner as if making eye contact across the impossible distance. Flight 447, this is Falcon leader. On my mark, turn left heading 095 and begin descent to flight level 280. Ready? Mark! Amaya banked the aircraft left, feeling the controls respond sluggishly without engine power. The F-22s matched her movement perfectly, maintaining their position with a precision that seemed impossible in these conditions. They descended into hell. The storm corridor that Colonel Martinez had described was unlike anything Amaya had ever experienced. The walls of the passage were vertical columns of rotating wind, lightning, and rain that reached from the ocean surface to the stratosphere. The path between them was barely 2 miles wide, and flying through it was like threading a needle while riding a roller coaster. Falcon leader, I'm getting severe buffeting from the corridor walls. Copy that. Flight 447. The turbulence will increase as we go deeper. You need to stay centered between us. If you drift toward either wall, the wind shear will flip you. The F-22s adjusted their position, moving slightly forward and inward, creating a visual corridor that Amaya could follow. She focused entirely on maintaining her position relative to the fighter jets, trusting that they knew where they were going. Behind her in the passenger cabin, people were praying, crying, and holding hands with strangers. The flight attendants, trained for emergencies but never expecting anything like this, did their best to keep everyone calm. Some passengers were writing goodbye messages on their phones, certain they were experiencing their final moments. But in the cockpit, Amaya Thompson was in complete control. Her hands moved across the controls with the steady precision of a surgeon, making micro-adjustments to keep the aircraft centered in the corridor. Every instinct told her this was impossible, but the evidence was right in front of her. The two F-22s were carving a path through conditions that should have destroyed them all. "Flight 447 coming up on the worst section," Stone radioed. "The corridor narrows to about 1.5 miles, and the wind shear increases by 40 knots. Stay with me." The aircraft bucked violently as they entered the narrow section. Warning systems that had been quiet suddenly came alive, screaming about wind shear, altitude deviation, and structural stress. Amaya could hear metal groaning as the Boeing 777's airframe flexed under loads it was never designed to handle. "David, what's our structural integrity?" "We're exceeding design limits, Captain, but the aircraft is holding together. For now. That's going to have to be good enough." The F-22s ahead of her suddenly rolled sharply right, and Amaya followed without hesitation. A massive lightning bolt struck exactly where they would have been if they had maintained course, the electrical discharge so powerful that it lit up the entire corridor like daylight. "Good reactions, Captain," Stone radioed. "We're halfway through. The corridor opens up again in about 5 miles. 5 miles had never seemed so far. Every second was a battle against wind, turbulence, and the fundamental laws of physics that said a powerless airliner couldn't fly through a Category 5 storm. But Amaya was proving that when skill, courage, and impossible circumstances collided, new rules could be written. The passengers felt the aircraft rolling, diving, and climbing through maneuvers that commercial aircraft never performed. Some were convinced they were in their final moments. Others found a strange calm, accepting their fate and making peace with whatever came next. A few watched through the windows and saw the impossible truth. 2 fighter jets were guiding them through a storm that should have killed them all. "Flight 447, the corridor's widening," Stone announced. "We're approaching the exit point. Once we clear the storm, you'll have about 15 miles of calm air before you need to ditch or restart those engines." "Falcon Leader, is there any possibility of engine restart?" "Unknown, Captain. That's going to depend on how much damage you sustained. But I can tell you this, you've flown through the impossible. Restarting a couple of engines should be easy compared to what you just did." The storm walls began to recede. The violent turbulence slowly decreased. Lightning strikes became less frequent, and then, like emerging from a tunnel, Flight 447 broke into clear air. Amaya could see stars. Actual stars, shining in a night sky that looked impossibly peaceful after the hell they had just traversed. The 2 F-22s maintained formation on her wings, their pilots having just accomplished something that would be classified and studied for decades. "Falcon Leader, Flight 447, we're clear of the storm. I don't have words for what you just did." "Save the thanks, Captain. We're not done yet. You still need to get this bird safely on the ground. Can you restart those engines?" Amaya looked at her engine displays. The fire warnings had stopped. Either the fires had burned themselves out or the storm had extinguished them. The engine parameters were showing damage, but they were within restart envelope. Maybe. "David, let's try an engine restart. Start with the right engine." "Captain, the checklist says we shouldn't attempt restart after fire unless absolutely necessary." "Marcus, we're gliding over the Atlantic Ocean without power. I'd say it's absolutely necessary." The engine restart procedure was complex, requiring precise timing and careful monitoring of temperatures, pressures, and airflow. Amaya had practiced it hundreds of times in simulators, but had never attempted it in actual flight, much less after the engine had been on fire and subjected to storm conditions that exceeded all design specifications. "Initiating right engine restart," David announced. "Fuel flow established, ignition sequence starting." Nothing happened. The engine remained dead, its turbine blades turning slowly from the aircraft's forward motion, but not producing any thrust. "Negative restart on right engine. Trying again. Second attempt. Still nothing. Left engine, same procedure. Third attempt on the left engine. Still dead." "Captain, Neither engine is responding. We don't have restart capability. Amaya ran the numbers in her head. They were descending through 22,000 feet, approximately 450 miles from the nearest land, with a glide ratio that gave them maybe 30 minutes before they hit the water. Falcon Leader, Flight 447, negative on engine restart. We're going to ditch. Copy that, Captain. We're going to escort you as far as we can and coordinate rescue operations. The storm you just flew through has cleared a path for rescue helicopters. If you can put this bird down safely, you'll have help within 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Amaya had to keep 312 people alive for 20 minutes after ditching a Boeing 777 in the Atlantic Ocean. The survival statistics for water landings were grim, especially at night, especially in these conditions. But she had just flown through the impossible. She could do this too. David, initiate ditching preparation. I want all passengers in brace position, life vests on, and flight attendants ready for evacuation. As David made the announcement, Amaya focused on setting up the perfect ditching approach. She needed to touch down parallel to the ocean swells at the minimum possible speed, with wings level and nose slightly up. The margin for error was essentially zero. The F-22s stayed with her, their pilots watching as the commercial airliner descended toward the dark water below. Flight 447, you're at 10,000 feet. Rescue helicopters are inbound to your ditching coordinates. You're doing great, Captain. Falcon Leader, I need one more favor. Can you illuminate the water surface with your landing lights? I need to see the wave patterns. Copy that. Flight 447, descending to 1,000 feet and activating landing lights. The two F-22s dove ahead of the airliner, their powerful landing lights creating pools of illumination on the ocean's surface. Amaya could see the swells now, 8 to 10 feet running in a northeast direction. She adjusted her approach angle to land parallel to the wave direction. All passengers, this is the captain. Brace for impact. Brace, brace, brace. At 500 feet, Amaya could see individual waves. At 300 feet, she could see the foam cresting on their peaks. At 100 feet, she pulled back on the control column, raising the nose to bleed off the last of their speed. The Boeing 777 touched the water at 140 knots, tail first, exactly as designed. The impact was tremendous. Passengers were thrown against their seatbelts, overhead bins burst open, and the sound of tearing metal filled the cabin as the tail section separated from the fuselage. But Amaya had done it perfectly. The aircraft remained upright, the wings stayed attached, and the main cabin section stayed intact. As the Boeing 777 settled into the water, already beginning to sink but still afloat, the evacuation began. Flight attendants opened the emergency exits, deployed the evacuation slides that converted to life rafts, and began the organized chaos of getting 312 people off a sinking aircraft. The training that had seemed so abstract during safety demonstrations became desperately real as passengers jumped into rafts, helped each other stay afloat, and fought against the panic that wanted to overwhelm them. Above them, the two F-22s circled, their pilots coordinating with rescue helicopters that were already approaching. Within 15 minutes, the first Coast Guard helicopter arrived, followed by 3 more. Within an hour, every passenger and crew member had been rescued from the water. Not a single life was lost. As Amaya climbed into the rescue helicopter, the last person off the aircraft she had just ditched in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, she looked back at Flight 447. The Boeing 777 was sinking slowly, its tail already underwater, its wings disappearing beneath the waves. Colonel Stone's voice came through the rescue helicopter's radio. Captain Thompson, this is Falcon Leader. That was the most incredible display of airmanship I've witnessed in 20 years of flying. You saved 312 lives today by doing things that aren't in any manual. Colonel, I couldn't have done it without you. You flew through hell to give us a chance. We gave you a path, Captain. You're the one who had the guts to take it. Have you ever accomplished something impossible by trusting people you'd never met? Sometimes the greatest achievements require perfect cooperation between strangers who become heroes together. 3 days later, Captain Amaya Thompson sat in a conference room at Coast Guard headquarters, surrounded by officials from the FAA, NTSB, the airline, and various military branches. The investigation into Flight 447 was already being called the most remarkable survival story in aviation history. The preliminary findings were extraordinary. The storm that had nearly destroyed them was confirmed as the most powerful and rapidly developing superstorm ever recorded over the Atlantic. 3 other aircraft had attempted to fly through it. None had survived. The corridor that Colonel Martinez had discovered was a meteorological anomaly that scientists were still trying to explain. "Captain Thompson," said the NTSB investigator, "can you explain your decision to follow the F-22s into the storm rather than attempting to turn back or ditch immediately?" Amaya considered the question carefully. "I evaluated all available options and determined that following the military escort through the storm corridor offered the highest probability of survival. Every other option had worse odds." "But you were flying a commercial airliner without engine power in formation with fighter jets through a Category 5 storm. That's not a standard procedure." "No," Amaya agreed, "but there was nothing standard about our situation. When standard procedures lead to certain death, you need to find non-standard solutions." The airline's chief pilot spoke up. "Captain Thompson, your actions were extraordinary, but they also violated numerous regulations about commercial aircraft operations. We're going to need to review your certification status." Before Amaya could respond, a voice from the back of the room interrupted. "I don't think that will be necessary." Everyone turned to see a woman in Air Force uniform entering the room. The stars on her shoulders indicated a rank that made everyone straighten in their seats. "General Patricia Morrison, United States Air Force," she introduced herself. "I've been reviewing the flight data and communications from Flight 447, and I'm here to tell you that Captain Thompson performed exactly as she was trained. She identified a threat, evaluated all options, made the best decision possible with available information, and executed that decision with extraordinary skill. General, with respect, commercial pilots aren't trained to fly formation with fighter jets." "No, but they are trained to accept assistance from any available resource during emergencies. Captain Thompson did exactly that. Furthermore, I'm recommending that the FAA develop new protocols for military-civilian cooperation during extreme weather events, using Flight 447 as the template." The investigation continued for weeks, but the conclusion was never in doubt. Captain Amaya Thompson had performed one of the greatest feats of airmanship in aviation history. She had kept her crew focused during impossible conditions, made decisions that saved 312 lives, and demonstrated that when skill meets courage, even the impossible becomes achievable. The media dubbed her the captain who flew through hell. Aviation safety organizations created new training programs based on her decision-making process. Military and civilian authorities established formal protocols for emergency cooperation. Insurance companies studied the incident to understand how proper training and calm leadership could turn potential disasters into survival stories. But for Amaya, the most important moment came 3 weeks after the ditching, when she attended a ceremony honoring everyone involved in the rescue. All 312 passengers were there, along with the crew, the Coast Guard pilots, and the 2 F-22 pilots who had guided them through the storm. Colonel Sarah Martinez approached her with a small wooden box. "Captain Thompson, I wanted to give you something. This is a patch from our squadron, the same patch that every Raptor pilot earns when they complete their most difficult mission. You earned it that night over the Atlantic." Inside the box was a cloth patch showing an F-22 Raptor flying through storm clouds with the motto, "Through hell and back." "Colonel, I was just doing my job." "Captain, your job is to fly passengers safely from point A to point B. Nobody's job description includes flying through Category 5 storms in a powerless aircraft while following fighter jet escorts through impossible corridors. What you did was way beyond any job. It was pure courage." Among the crowd, Amaya saw families who had been reunited, children who still had parents, and parents who still had children. She saw the faces of passengers who had been convinced they were going to die, but were instead alive because of split-second decisions made at 37,000 feet. One passenger, a young mother with a baby, approached her with tears streaming down her face. "Captain Thompson, I don't know how to thank you. My daughter just turned 6 months old. Because of you, she'll grow up with a mother." Amaya felt her own eyes filling with tears. "Ma'am, I'm just glad we all made it home." 6 months after Flight 447, Captain Amaya Thompson returned to flying. The airline had offered her a desk job, a promotion to management or early retirement with full benefits. She chose to go back to the cockpit. "I'm a pilot," she explained to the reporters who asked why she would return to flying after such a traumatic experience. "Flying is what I do, and after everything that happened, I understand better than ever how important it is to be prepared for the impossible." Her first flight back was a New York to London route, the same route as Flight 447. The passengers gave her a standing ovation when she introduced herself over the PA system. The crew hugged her before takeoff. And when they landed safely at Heathrow, 6 hours and 43 minutes later, Amaya knew she had made the right choice. The storm that had nearly killed them had been a once-in-a-century event. The corridor through it had been a meteorological miracle. The F-22 pilots who had guided them were exceptional aviators who happened to be in the right place at the right time. And Amaya Thompson was a captain who had the skill and courage to accept an impossible offer and execute an impossible plan. But more than all of that, Flight 447 proved something fundamental about human capability. That when we work together, when we trust each other's expertise, and when we refuse to accept that some challenges are too great to overcome, we can accomplish things that seem impossible. If you've ever faced a moment when every option seemed terrible and you had to choose the least impossible path, remember Flight 447. Sometimes the storm is going to come, whether you're ready or not. Sometimes the only way out is straight through. And sometimes the people you need most are the ones you never expected to meet. The impossible is just a challenge waiting for someone brave enough to attempt it. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.